DC, welcome into the Blitz. How you doing?
Doing great, Martin. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Hey, let's talk about this. You and I have been talking about Q since the first game and what he did, and slowly watch him become more and more of a national figure in terms of just his play. I made the statement earlier that I think he may be the most impactful player. Just when you watch his position and what his position traditionally does and the number of plays he makes as a nose tackle, I can't think of a more impactful player under the Nick Saban era than what Quinnen Williams has been.
Well, I would agree with you, Martin. Early on I was touting him. I guess it was spring ball when I first noticed him, and I had happened to go to some of the practices and into the 8A game, and it was right down on field level. But hearing some of the players who were going up against him in practice, like Jonah Williams and others, talk about how hard he was to block and how he had just really improved, and then I got to see him, face to face, and every part of his game looked like he had just upped his game. And I kind of identified him early on as one of the people who would make an impact this year. Good, one of the unknowns, and I've been right on just because of what he's done. His development is really good. In my opinion, I don't know of a better defensive lineman that has come through the Nick Saban era. And I know that's a bold statement because there's so many great ones that are playing in the NFL right now. And I know other people I've heard people say, well, what about Eshaun Robinson? What about Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne? And those are all fantastic. But there's nothing against those guys. It's just that Quinnen Williams, in my opinion, has the skill set. He's put all the intangibles together. As you heard Nick Saban talk about the other day, his intelligence, his hand placement, and what to do. But I think that's a development issue. And also, I believe we aren't giving enough credit to the new coaching staff that Coach Saban brought in. I think Coach Kudlowski, who's coached some great players and defensive line, I think he's added to that as well. But I think this is something that you got to look at. Why do I say Quinnen Williams best? You got to put him up against everybody. He had all those guys have great skills, and Mountain Cody had a great skill, but Quinnen Williams has all those skills.
Yeah.
He can do all of those things.
He can do everything.
Mount Cody could occupy two blockers, and people behind him had great games. Quinnen Williams occupies those two same blockers, then sheds them and makes the sack himself.
Right.
So he does it all. And so he does make everybody on the team around him better. So I just think that's why I say he's the best. He might be the best that I've seen in my lifetime nationally, maybe up there with Warren Sapp. I think that's I call him as my best defensive lineman. I think I said it earlier on your show that he reminds me of him. I think he plays with that kind of fashion. But, Quinnen Williams is another consistent. He's consistent. He doesn't take plays off. And, Warren Sapp had a knock against him by taking plays off. So, again, I may elevate Quinnen Williams as one of the best defensive players lineman I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I would put him – and Ndamukong Suh was probably potentially my guy because he was such a beast because he was so athletic. He could do it all. And I think you can move Quinnen Williams to one of our tackle positions, and he would be even more dominant. I really believe that he's taking on double teams and he's shedding them and splitting them and pushing them back as if they're not even a double team. And this is a kind of a follow-up question because I was going to ask you this, and you actually alluded to it. Coach Kuligowski, they say Coach Bryant was really good, wasn't necessarily the greatest coach when it came to coaching the superstars, but he could take a guy that was good and make him great. And sometimes the elite talents don't know how to work, and therefore the work you put in with them doesn't always multiply. And I just wonder, is that Kuligowski's secret? Because that's what he did at Missouri, was he took these guys that were really good high school players, but he made them elite SEC players. And I just wonder if that's what's happening with Q.
Well, I think for sure. I think Coach Kuligowski's got a history of taking players that maybe have never played the position before. Converting players that played basketball, converting players that played tight end, put them on the defensive line, seeing something in them intangible that says, hey, I can coach this guy. And I think he really has done that against, I said early on, watch for our interior linemen. I was talking about Isaiah Buggs, Raekwon Davis, and Quinnen Williams to affect the quarterback. When your position coach and his Twitter handle is "Let's meet at the quarterback." I mean, his mindset is, "I'm going to push the pocket. I'm not. We're just not going to hit here and occupy a blocker. We're going to shed the blocker and get to the quarterback." And so, I think that kind of mindset, that aggressive play, Coach Kuglaus has brought across the line has really helped our defense. And I think it's had to develop over the first couple of games. Maybe not as good as it is now. I think we're probably better today than we have been defensively because of that development, that mindset.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun game to watch on Saturday if these guys come back out and play. Because last year's game against Mississippi State is definitely on their minds as they let Mississippi State hang around. College football playoffs rankings coming out. Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, the first four in. Georgia, Oklahoma, the next two out. And then the top 10, Washington State, West Virginia, Ohio State, LSU at 7-2, only falling to number 10. When you look at this, what's your initial thoughts on the college football playoff? And can Alabama survive even potentially with a loss to Georgia?
Well, first of all, I think the top four is kind of what I told you last week. I didn't have LSU in my top four because I expected Alabama to beat LSU handily, and they did that. But I didn't have LSU far down the list. People are out there talking about, well, hey, LSU, it's the SEC bias. LSU's ahead of two one-loss teams. Well, LSU has more victories against the top 25 than the two one-loss teams combined that are right behind them. So I think LSU's strength of schedule puts them where they are. I don't have a problem with that. Top four is what I thought it would be. If they all hold pat and win all the games from here on out, I think that's probably where it'll shake out to be. But, anything can happen. Alabama's got some tough games coming up against Mississippi State. I think this is potential, as I said on my broadcast yesterday, for a trap game. We got inevitably you're going to have Alabama-Georgia showdown in the SEC championship game. What happens there will go a long way to determining the Final Four as well. So there's a lot of football left to be played. So I think right now they've got it right. It's probably where I would put everybody.
Does Georgia take care of business against Auburn? Does Auburn ride that late comeback against Texas A&M to a potential upset victory in the Gus Malzahn fashion this week in Athens?
Well, I don't know. I think after the announcement yesterday that Gus Malzahn is definitely coming back.
Well, you know what that means, though, right?
I do.
Yeah. That's usually the kiss of death. I mean, I
know it. Anytime you have to come out in the middle of the year to decide to make a statement if your coach is coming back, that tells you what's going on within your program. But I don't think Auburn is. I just don't think they're on the talent level with Georgia. I think Georgia beats them in that game. Stranger things that we've seen happen with Auburn, so I can't. You can never rule them out with all the things that have happened in the past. The Georgia Auburn series, but I think Georgia wins that game.
Yeah,
I think Alabama is going to be favored in every game they play from here on out, but there's always a chance that you can be tripped up and beaten. I think Michigan, probably Notre Dame has the easiest road to remain undefeated based on the schedules and the opponents they play. But Clemson looks like they're hitting on all cylinders. They could be tripped up somewhere along the line, but it doesn't look likely. So I think right now, the odds are on the favor of these Final Four making it through.
And really, when you think about it, this would be a good Final Four from a helmet perspective. You got three blue bloods from days of old: Alabama, Notre Dame, and Michigan. Close to being top 4 or 5 winningest programs in football history. I know Michigan's number one. Alabama just hit 900 wins, so Notre Dame has quite a few, but they've been kind of irrelevant as of late. And then Clemson, other than Alabama, if it wasn't for Alabama, Dabo Swinney would probably have the greatest run since Coach Bryant. But unfortunately, he's had to meet the tide a couple different times. Anyway, we're talking to DC in the Capstone Report. We'll continue that conversation right here coming out of halftime, we'll get into DC's assessment of the LSU game and then flip forward to Alabama versus Mississippi State right here on the Blitz. DC, we'll just start with that, kind of piggyback off that conversation. Man, when you lose Devontae Smith and then Ruggs steps up and Ruggs goes down and Waddle makes a catch on the sideline, and what can you say about Jerry Jeudy? And those four guys, plus you throw in Irv Smith, and what a receiving core Alabama has from the skill position.
No doubt, Martin. I think best receivers Alabama's ever had as far as the core group. I don't see you can't isolate one and cover one and shut them down, because if you get on one, somebody else is going to beat you. You and I identified Jalen Waddle early on in the practices as somebody who's going to be an impact player. And, man, he has been an impact player. Not so much on special teams as I thought he would be, but really impact player on coming in and helping out when Ruggs, Smith not 100%, and just playing as that fifth wide out. So, I think we have some of the best receivers in the nation. And you can't talk about Jerry Jeudy's moves. He has more moves, I tell you. Just a couple of those plays where he juked the LSU defenders, and the LSU defenders are all laying over in a pile.
Yeah.
So
that boy can snatch that car in reverse and still be going forward as fast as anybody I've ever seen. It's pretty amazing. That, what's so funny is, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember from the Nike opening, I can't remember which DB he was going against, but there was a video of Jerry Jeudy as a high school player making that exact same move, and he's perfected it even more so now. But DC, when we look at what's happening with Alabama offensively overall, Tua's knee, to me, it looked like it was a little banged up. There's a photographer named Denon, which was at the game. He said that field had a little bit of a slope as well, I guess. And so the knee and the slope, because Tua mentioned that, kind of adjusted him early. But the question I want to ask you is, you've talked about this from the very beginning. Hey, the one area that Tua can get better at is on the RPO plays. Just asking your opinion, do you think early on he may have pulled it a little too often and was trying to force it a little bit in terms of the passes, and that's why he was a little bit off early in the game?
No doubt. I said that, some of my friends, we were texting around, and one of them said, he's having an off game. Well, I don't think Tua was having an off game. I think he was making the wrong decisions, as I've said and pointed out on this show in the past. He's making the wrong decisions, pulling it down, trying to make a play with his arm when the run game was there. And his, if he ever gets that and I still think he hasn't had his perfect game. And boy, doesn't that sound crazy? If he ever gets that down, Alabama's offense will jump up exponentially in that whatever game that he gets it, where he makes all the right reads and hands it off when he's supposed to, and makes the pass. Because to be honest, there are some times where he hands the ball off that he has a wide open receiver running open in the field that would have been a great pass. There's some times where he passes the ball that he should have handed the ball off, and those could be big plays, and it's hard to even think about it, but he's getting better. But Tua can get better in that area. Not that he did a terrible job. It's just that he has one or two plays that could have had big plays on if he'd have made the right decision. But he does a good job. That's the one area that I think he can work on. Yeah,
it's tough to nitpick anything he's doing right now at this point. But when a kid plays at that level, you always want to try to get better, and that's the one thing that I've seen that maybe he could do a little better. And like I said, I think because of their speed, he was not taking his normal. Even though he has a quick release, to me he was not as fluid on that release, and that's what caused it to be off a little bit. He threw a couple balls in the ground, but I'll take 25 of 42 for 295 and 3 total touchdowns any day of the week.
A lot of that also, Martin, is LSU
right.
knew that Tua makes a pre-snap read.
Absolutely.
That's where he's going to go.
Right.
So they knew that. They used that to their advantage. There's a couple of those situations where he made a decision already had his decision. It was a quick release,
right?
And he should have waited to actually read the down lineman, because the down lineman was playing pass, not run in those situations.
Right.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And I love it when he makes a pre-snap read. I mean, you hear that's what quarterbacks in the NFL have to do, because the game is so fast in the NFL, and he does that real well. But sometimes he can take advantage of a defense if he would read on the ball, and that's hard to tell somebody. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying if there's any place that he could improve, he can improve in that area.
Absolutely, and that's what we're talking about: improvement, not necessarily bad play. When you look at this Alabama defense, I've been saying it from week one that this is a really good defense that needed to just get better. They were young. They needed an external motivation. And they've shown that against all good opponents, coming up with the shutout. What's your overall assessment of Tosh Lupoi and this maturing defense under Nick Saban?
I think overall it is taking leaps and bounds from the first game. It's grown. It's matured. This is what you want your defense to do. You want it to peak just at the right time. I don't think we've played our best defensive game yet either. And I'm thinking that they accepted the challenge. Everybody talked about LSU, and they should. It was a big game at home, and LSU came out with a lot of talk and how they were going to do. But Alabama says, "Hey, what about our defense? We got a good defense too." And they stepped up and made a statement in the game, and I think that's for it. Now, this game coming up against Mississippi State, everybody's talking about Simmons and Sweat and how great a Mississippi State's defense is. Alabama's defense is right there with them. So why not? So I think it's another motivating factor to come in and play. And believe me, I know you probably won't believe this, so I'm talking about Tua getting better. I think this game is set up for Quinnen Williams to have his best game, because this is the type of play with a quarterback that's going to run the ball and going to make their big plays on running the ball, reading the RPO that he either hands it off or runs it himself. This is the type of game that Quinnen Williams is built for, and I really believe that he's going to make a difference in this game. He'll have his best game against Mississippi State. Yeah,
that is definitely a belief that I have, especially since they like to run it up the middle on his RPOs. That's a flip over. This is kind of the only weakness I've seen from Alabama this year is the kicking game, and I know you go back and watch the kicks, and you were talking about some of the things that Tua was doing early on. We made the switch several games ago. Contrary to what was said on TV, this wasn't the first game that Mac Jones was the holder. What in the world was it? A combination center, holder, and kicker on Saturday?
Well, I think it was I don't know. I can't talk about the snapper. I think the snapper had the right spot. I didn't see it being off any degree. I think it was a matter of the holder just not getting the ball placement down right on both of those kicks. If you look at back, I think the kick, his timing is thrown off. And
but why didn't he just go ahead and still kick the ball though?
Yeah. I think at that point in time, he had lost all sense of what he was supposed to do.
Just swing your leg. I saw the Georgia kid at Blankenship. Actually, they did the whole, hey, he's made 107 in a row thing a few weeks back. He had the exact same play. He stopped, planted his foot, and just kicked his leg, and it, stumbled over. Our guy put his foot on the ball, but he's young, and I understand that. And Blankenship is a senior, so. Yeah. Hey, DC, when we look forward to Mississippi State, you kind of hinted at it, but tell me, what does Alabama need to do to take care of business against a Mississippi State?
Well, I think defensively, Quinnen Williams, Isaiah Buggs, and Raekwon Davis have to be on the line of scrimmage and stopping the run with the quarterback, stopping the run with the running back, and give our defense linebackers opportunities to make plays as well against those RPOs. I believe if we do that early on, and it's going to open up where they're going to have to pass. I don't think Nick Fitzgerald can pass on Alabama. I just don't. He has a tendency to throw interceptions. So I think it'll be a field day for our safeties in this game. Should we be able to stop the run and make them have to throw the ball? So I think Alabama. That's the way Alabama beats this game. One thing I said on my podcast that some others have now picked up on. We didn't call his name out a lot in the LSU game, but I promise you, one of the reasons that we were so successful is the way we played. Our defensive backs played that game, and Deontay Thompson, his range as safety to be able to roam and stay back, and that all starts with your defensive line making plays, your linebackers making plays, so you don't have to use your safety in the run game. If we have to build our safety up in the run game, it opens up the pass. He was able to stay back, and that is what stopped LSU from throwing deep balls across the middle. They didn't want to test him. We didn't have to call his name, but he did affect the play in that game. So I think Deontay Thompson is right for having a big game, not only Quinnen Williams on stopping the run, but Deontay Thompson and getting some interceptions in this game of any balls that were to come over the middle.
All right, that's DC in the Capstone Report. DC, I'm going to flip back for one more question for you. DC in the Capstone Report presented by RollTideBama.com, freelancepictures.com. You can find this podcast at DC Capstone Report. He puts it up every Monday. DC, when you look back, just kind of the LSU game, takeaway, whether you want to talk about the horrible holding, I hadn't heard anybody really talk about Loxley bringing out the speed sweep, several other things that happened in that game. Anything that you want to bring to our listeners' attention?
Something I alluded to right there. I think during Nick Saban, I've always said you give him a week to prepare for a game, he's great. You give him more than a week to prepare, he's phenomenal. And I think one thing that Alabama did in this game was they changed their scheme. And LSU said it. They looked for Alabama to come out and play more man-to-man. They could take advantage of their tall, athletic wide receivers. And Alabama changed and played in more matchup zone. And I think that subtle change on the defensive side really made a difference. The other subtle change on the offensive side was Alabama was disruptive with the noise, and in practice that in practice. But you played there, Martin. You can't manufacture enough noise in practice of what's going to happen at LSU. Well, Tua, Pierce Baker, some of the other linemen all realized that they just weren't clicking on all cylinders. Got to the sideline with the instructions from the coach and said, "Hey, okay, that's just are we prepared for this?" So they go back out there for the silent count. That's a very subtle change, but it really changed the way our offense is produced from that point forward. So those two before game and in game adjustments to show you how that preparation trumps the passion, and Alabama was prepared. So I think those are things that our listeners ought to key on. We're getting better. We're making adjustments, even on a team that's undefeated and looks like it's clicking on all cylinders. There's some behind-the-scenes things going on to make it even better each game.
All right, that's DC in the Capstone Report. You can find him at David Cott 50, David Cott 50, and you can find the DC Capstone Report at dccapstonereport.com. Thanks, DC. We'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, Martin. Have a great day and roll tide.
Roll Tide.